Good evening. One today is Thursday, May 29th, 2025. Update for Friday the 30th. All right, let's go. Windows setups again tonight. Obviously, the FNGR imploded without triggering. That was an honorable mention from last night. Not seeing a whole lot out there, not a whole lot worthwhile, I should say. I am seeing quite a few stocks that are trending nicely, so we could see some setups on pullbacks. Not a whole lot to report in portfolio. We'll get to that in a little while. KGC still looks like one of these pot stocks that has bottomed out. It's a little wide and loose. It does have some issues along the way, but it is kind of bottoming out in here. That's it for the Landry list tonight. There's just not a whole lot out there. Let's just punch in the portfolio real quick. Opening gap reversal down a smidge on TFM. Kind of hanging in there, but you know me, I sure like seeing new highs sooner rather than later. In KGC, same sort of action there. Tried to rally, came back in a little bit, but not enough to really report about or get too excited about one way or the other. But yeah, I sure would like to see some new highs sooner rather than later. Let's take a look at the overall market. And of course, as usual, we'll drill down a little bit here and there. First of all, S&P 500. A little bit of a kind of an opening lap reversal. It was higher earlier in the day, or I should say pre-market. It was a lot higher, and then it came back in. Still closed up a little bit on the day, better than the poke in the eye. I'd like to see us get past this short-term resistance right around this prior pivot point here. And of course, we still have some overhead supply to deal with. Taking a look at the NASDAQ Composites. A little bit more obvious there. Opening gap reversal. Let's just take a look at spiders real quick. Let's see if there's a whole lot of difference. No, not much difference from the cash. Anyway, opening gap reversal in the NASDAQ. As you can see, it still ended up a little bit on the day, but not enough to get excited about. The problem here is the overhead supply is a little bit more pronounced, and it's just going to have to work its way through that. Take a look at the Rusty 2000. Still not a lot to get excited about with the Rusty. It's behind this or below this shorter term resistance, and it has lots and lots of longer term resistance to deal with. You know what I mean, though. Take things one day at a time. Transport selling off a little bit. They bumped up against this, you guessed it, overhead supply, and tended to, so far at least, they've kind of rolled back over. Semiconductors opening gap reversal, not getting through that resistance just yet. Again, one day at a time. It did end up a little bit, or they did end up a little bit, I should say. Kind of indicative of what happened with NVIDIA. NVIDIA opening gap reversal there. It's still closed up a decent amount on the day, 3%, but it has to get through this overhead supply like many other areas, like Sky Computing, for instance. Lots of overhead supply to deal with. Their retail, on an individual basis, I am seeing some momentum here, and pretty good momentum, high HV type of momentum. However, overall, like a lot of other areas, it still has a lot of overhead supply to deal with. Gold, a commodity, up a little today, better than poking eye, a little wide and loose and choppy as of late. Longer term, let's take a look at it weekly. As you can see, still looks pretty darn good, so we're just resting a little bit, and I hate to use the word hope, but hopefully for the next big move out. Same thing goes for gold stocks. Looking okay, not too far from these all-time highs. Sure would like to see us get there, though. Defense, I always get those two mixed up for some reason. Defense, not a bad day there, up a little, and that's enough to keep it at all-time highs. We could see some setups here, obviously, fairly soon. Like Boeing, for instance, I was looking at that earlier. I put it in one of my momentum lists, beginning to really wake up. So some of these old stodgy type of companies, you would think, are actually beginning to trend nicely. I hadn't talked about the energies lately. Not a whole lot to report. They're wide and loose and all over the place, and then just kind of chopping around. So that's why I haven't said much about them lately. Bonds, not too far away from these all-time lows. Beginning to bounce off of them a little bit, one day at a time. I sure would like to see us get away from these lows sooner rather than later. Home builders kind of chopping around in here. Still questionable longer term. Cybersecurity. Trying a new system here. Sorry about that as I work through it. Down fairly hard, off its worst levels, but the problem here is that it is stalling at the prior highs. And again, as I preached, it's one of these V-shaped recoveries. Now, defense didn't seem to care about this, but you do need to pay attention to it because it is meaningful. People who bought at the prior highs are often looking to get out at break even. That's just human nature. Financials, an okay day there. They need to get past these prior highs, so still has a little resistance to overcome, both shorter term and longer term. EFA shares, up a little bit in here, kind of beginning to chop around a bit. So far, the trend remains up, but they have lost a little steam based on their recent run as of late. Ideally, you'd like to see just the opposite, more of a gradual trend followed by an accelerated uptrend. Let's take a look at uranium. Uranium kind of hanging in there, looking okay. If you take a look at like URA, you can see it came in a little bit today, but so far this uptrend remains intact, kind of all over the place longer term. And yeah, you have that V-shaped recovery, so we have to see if it can follow through. So sit tight. It's everything's kind of shaking out right now, and I think the best action right now, and just based on the database, of course, is no new action. And as you know, you have to listen to the database and listen to what it's telling you. And we're not seeing any setups because the methodology requires a pullback. Once it pulls back a little bit in here on an individual issue basis or sector basis, or of course the overall market, we'll start seeing setups, and then we'll have to obviously take those one setup at a time and evaluate on a setup by setup basis. I think that's it for tonight. Everybody have a fantastic night. Sorry I went long. I just want to kind of fill you in on what I'm seeing and not seeing as of late. Everybody have a great night. We'll talk tomorrow. Thank you so much.